Burnout is so real, especially in today's day and age. It seems like more than ever, our society and our culture is becoming more burned out in the lives that they live, the jobs that they have, relationships, their health, whatever it is. We are just tired, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And today, I want to share something with you that kind of came across my mind and my heart about burnout. And it was while I was reading C.S. Lewis's book called Mere Christianity. And if you're not a Christian, please stick around because this is very practical to all of us, and Christians or non. And it really spoke to how C.S. Lewis. I mean, the book is really about the Christianity, how he came to faith. But what is interesting is he also deals with issues that we still struggle with today, and not even directly. When I titled this video called C.S. Lewis, he solved burnout. He doesn't really talk about burnout in the sense, but what I think he gets at is actually a way that we can solve our burnout culture. It is a way that we can try to overcome this fear and anxiety that just seems to plague us day in and day out. And there's been times in my life I have dealt with burnout and just feeling just depressed and tired all the time, and just so not wanting to do what I do and things like that. And you might be there right now. You might be watching this video, and reason why you are watching this video because you feel burned out, you feel tired, you're anxious all the time, and you want a way out. You want help. You're trying to seek that catch-all, that cure that's going to stop burnout. And I'm just gonna be honest. Burnout is something that we don't get over quickly. Burnout is something that sometimes it takes a few weeks to maybe in a few months to finally feel like our lives are back on track. However, there are things that we can do and things that we can be thinking about that can help us begin to get over this season that we're in. And so, burnout is one of those things that I believe our culture has produced it. We constantly, with social media being how it is, with YouTube being how it is, we are constantly trying to live up to someone else's standards. And no matter how hard we try, we can never be good enough as the person on Instagram. We can never, shoot videos as Mr. Beast. There's things that we can never seem to, we can never satisfy ourselves by looking and comparing, with other people. And so because we are, trying to live up to someone else's standards, someone else's values, someone else's ideas, it's difficult because when you think you have it all figured out, when you think, okay, this is a great idea, I'm going to follow this, then another video comes across to your feed. And I deal with this with productivity systems, and it's so hard for me because I'll start on one. Right now I'm doing note cards to take for my commonplace book. I've tried Obsidian. I've even tried just regular notebooks, and I keep changing constantly. It's not helpful, but it creates this sense of anxiety within me because I'm trying to always live up to what someone else is trying to do. What they say, hey, this works. Hey, this is what you should be doing. And we all fall prey to this. We all fall prey to this idea that we have to live up to something that is this great grand idea that someone else had, or someone else, it's working for them. Why isn't it working for me? And it's also this created this sense of productivity. We're trying to do more than ever. I think they said, and this was a few years ago, that the average college student today has to learn 3 times more than a college student had to in the 1970s. Now, granted, that has to do some with technology. Obviously, the speed of information is far greater, so you can learn more. But we are trying to produce. We're focusing so much on output that we're not focusing on input. And when we don't focus on input, then our lives begin to shrivel up. Our lives begin to feel, more stress. Our lives, eventually leads to burnout. And we try to live this moral and virtuous life that we just can't seem to continue, keep living up to. Stoicism is really popular right now, and rightly so. I love Stoic philosophy. I think if I wasn't a Christian, I probably would be a Stoic. There's some issues I have with Stoicism, but that could be for another video. But when we're trying to live up to this idea of whether it be the cardinal virtues or trying to live up to moral standards of a society, whatever it is, we're trying to constantly live up to this hype, live up to this moral standard that's been created for us. And that can just lead to this sense of feeling of anxiousness, burnout, because you're recognizing I can't do it. You're recognizing I can't live up to how everybody else wants me to live, or I can't live up to how all these other people are living. And so within inside of you, it creates this sense of urgency. You feel like I have to do this now. I can't wait. I can't wait to be successful. I have to be an entrepreneur today. And so all these things lead up to what I consider burnout. Now, how does C.S. Lewis fit all into this? And like I said before, if you're not a Christian, please continue to listen, because again, this is an idea that I think resonates with all of us. And so C.S. Lewis, he talks about the cardinal virtues in his book, Mere Christianity. And he lists the 4 cardinal virtues, and then he has 3 theological virtues. One is faith, second is hope, and the third is charity. Now, today I'm going to be talking about faith, in particular, of how it can help us understand and learn more about how to overcome burnout. Now, when you believe in God, one of the things that people who are Christians really struggle with is trying to live up to God's moral standard. And the reality is that we can't. We can't live up to God's moral standard. There's nothing that we can do to save ourselves. And just much like the secular world, there's nothing that we can do within ourselves to live up to the standard of, fulfilling all the moral virtues. I mean, we can try, but ultimately we're going to fail. And I want to quote C.S. Lewis here real quick. He says this about basically faith and what it means when we try to live morally. He says, I said just now that the question of faith in this sense arises after a man has tried his level best to practice the Christian virtues and found that he fails, and seen that even if he could, he would only be giving back to God what was already God's own. In other words, he discovers his bankruptcy. So C.S. Lewis is referring to the idea that when you believe in God, you're trying to live up to this Christian virtue, trying to live up to this Christian, the faith, the Christian, the Old Testament law, and you realize pretty quickly that you are morally bankrupt, right? Like there is nothing you can do to save yourself. There's nothing you can do to live a moral life. And so if like I said, if you're not a Christian, you're trying to live up to this idea that I'm supposed to be like the culture, I'm supposed to live morally, I'm supposed to live out all these virtues. You recognize pretty quickly that I can't keep all these. There's nothing that I can do that is within inside of me that can give me the hope that, hey, I'm going to conquer all these one day and everything's going to turn out great. And that's what C.S. Lewis is getting at here in this chapter about faith, is that realizing that when we try to be good, when we try to live moral lives, all it does is lead to burnout. All it does is lead to this realization that we are morally bankrupt. We have this within inside ourselves that we can overcome, that we can conquer, that we can get over, this hump of immoralism. But the reality is that we can't. And this leads to burnout. This leads to ourselves trying to live up to a standard that is something we can't do. Now, I know if you're not a believer, I mean, you still have a word for this. And in Christianity, we call this, immorality. We call it sin. And even in philosophy, you see the word sin show up from time to time. But this idea of immoral, this sense of in our hearts and our nature that we are naturally immoral beings, we all can agree that, sin exists, that there's some inherent part of us that is prideful, that we're selfish, that, there's parts of us that are can be considered evil. And what Lewis is getting at here is looking at that because of that reason, every time that we try to live a moral life on our own merit, every time we try to live a moral life on our own power, every time we try to live a moral life under our own strength, we fail time and time again. And that's because we are met with the reality that we are morally bankrupt. Like there's no way to dig out of the hole that we're in. And so it just leads to this feeling of anxiousness and burnout because you realize, man, there is nothing that I can do to overcome this feeling of hurt and pain and depression and sadness. And you can see this happening in our society because you see the self-help section keep growing. More books are written every day about how to be more productive, how to be a better person, how to grow, not just spiritually, but how to grow mentally, how to grow as an intellectual. There's all these books that are seeking to help change who you are because you're seeking to change who you are. You're tired of feeling the way you do. And if this wasn't a problem, then we wouldn't even have a section for self-help. If sin wasn't a real thing, if immoralism wasn't a real thing, then we wouldn't have this section of self-help books. So how does C.S. Lewis solve this? How does he solve burnout? So he solves this with this idea, this question that if we're trying to live morally, say today, I'm going to live the best I can to fulfill, whether it be God's law, man's law, whatever it is. I'm going to do my best to fulfill what I'm trying to accomplish. But then the idea is still in the back of your mind thinking, man, maybe tomorrow I can try harder. And so you recognize really quickly that there's nothing that I can do that's ever really going to accomplish true moralism. And so then what he says all this trying leads up to the vital moment at which you turn to God and say, you must do this. I can't. Now, again, I'm a Christian. I'm a former pastor. And recognizing this and reading this really strikes deep to my core because there's so many times that I try to live up to a moral standard that I've created or that the world has created. And I fail time and time again. And I finally have to throw my hands up and say, God, you must do this. And the reality is that you have to seek something higher than yourself. There's nothing inside of you that can lead to a sense of good works that will bring peace and comfort to your life. There's nothing that you can do. You're always going to have this sense of moral bankruptcy. You're always going to have this sense that there's nothing that I can do better because each day you're going to keep thinking, hey, I can do more. I can do more. It just leads to burnout. It just leads to this further feeling of incompleteness. This sense of feeling that I'm never going to be good enough. It leads to depression and anxiety. And it's no wonder that our young people of today are struggling with this, basically living as an adult because they're constantly being fed these lies of the world that they have to be someone that they're not designed to be. That there's nothing that they can do that's going to give them a sense of freedom from basically our incompleteness, their failings as just human beings, as just being born. There's just things that inside of us we can't do, and that's why C.S. Lewis gets to this point that only God can do these things. And this leads us to think that as we begin to grow, as we begin to lead ourselves out of this sense of idleness or burnout, we don't sit and ponder, hey, am I growing today? How do I know if I'm growing? No, the reality is we just start doing. We start living our lives, pursuing, the good things, whether it be of God or the good things of nature, whatever you believe in. If we start doing these things step by step, day by day, we're going to see growth over time. You don't just stop, each day you don't just take an account and think, hey, how do I feel today? No. Growth comes through practice. Growth comes through time. And eventually one day you'll wake up and go, wow, I feel better today. I'm here. I'm where I feel called to be. And C.S. Lewis, again, he says this, let me quote this. He says, and what matters is the nature of the change in itself, not how we feel while it is happening. It is the change from being confident about our own efforts to the state in which we despair of doing anything for ourselves and leave it to God. So Christians, how does C.S. Lewis solve burnout? He reminds us that when we try to have any kind of moral effort, when we try to have any sense that I can do more, I can save myself, all that does is causes us to throw in the towel and lean into Christ. That doesn't mean that we just, we just throw away, our ideas of moralism, that we shouldn't try to be like Christ. No, we should try to be like Christ. But the beauty of it is that while we are trying, Christ is still saving you. And that is the freedom, the comfort that comes from God, is that even though we are faced with our moral bankruptcy, even though we are faced with this truth that there's nothing that we can do to save ourselves, we are met with the grace and mercy of Jesus Christ. And so I would encourage you today, as you're thinking about this, if you're struggling with burnout, if you're struggling with depression, ask yourself, am I trying to live a life that I'm not designed to live? Am I trying to live morally when I am unable to? Am I putting my hope and trust in things that are not eternal? Am I putting my hope and trust in things that are only temporary? So these are questions to ask yourself to hopefully will guide you and give you answers to ultimately that the only way that you can find hope and comfort in this world is through Jesus Christ. And so I hope this video has helped you. I hope this video has encouraged you. I hope you have some sense of that. The reality is that, there's nothing that you can do. There's nothing that you can pay. There's nothing you can buy to overcome that spiritual bankruptcy. Only through Jesus Christ can we live again. So that's the video for today. That's it. If you've liked this video, please hit that button and subscribe down below. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And hope you guys have a great and wonderful week.